This time I didn't even think about it, but I got a different shirt on. You know, when I'm seeking Yahweh for a word, I always am asking, what do the people need to hear that will help them persevere, that will encourage, that will give them hope, that will teach them something new? The path of righteousness will never work for you if you're not sold out, if you're not desperate for Him, if He's not your God. Forsaking all others and cleave unto Him. I've been to 2 weddings recently. To cleave is to adhere firmly, stick firmly and closely or loyally and unwaveringly unto Him. We have to forsake all others and cleave unto Him. You see, you'll never have a new beginning until you reach the end of you, the end of your will, your way, your wants. The scripture says, because they have no changes, therefore they fear not Yah. As much as Yahweh is for you, you will not succeed in this walk living in the land of compromise. Understand, compromise in and of itself is not an evil thing. It can be quite a good thing. But the things of Yahweh can never be compromised. There is no compromising with Yahweh. His way is always right. You know why we compromise? Because we can't see the rightness in either way, so we compromise. No compromising with Yahweh. He's always right. He's always right. That's my intro. We're going to look at Exodus. I'm going to tell a story as I jump around in the book of Exodus. So we're going to start at chapter 3. But yeah, everybody knows, it starts with a Pharaoh who rose up who knew not Joseph, right? So somebody had to come in along the scene. So we know several years have passed because Joseph was pretty famous in Egypt. Because not only did he save his family, he saved the Egyptians. So he's very famous. So it was years passed and somebody rose up, a Pharaoh who rose up and did not know Joseph. And they had this nation of people, and it was a nation of people, lots of people. They were fearful of them, so they made them slaves. But according to the word of Yahweh, remember, Yahweh told Abraham, you were going to go into a place and be there for many years. So now it's time for deliverance. So Yahweh is calling for one. He's going to bring forth Moses, which that's miraculous in and of itself because Pharaoh's trying to figure out how to keep these people who are having babies every time you turn around. And so, we'll just kill all the males, but the women, the midwives, are afraid to do that because it's like they don't want Yahweh coming after them, so they won't do it. And so they say, oh, well, these women are so good at having babies, they just pop out a baby, and, so before we even get there. And so Pharaoh came up with another plan. Well, okay, so even after they have the babies, you take the babies and throw them into the river and kill them. So here we have a family who has a baby. I don't know what Moses looked like as a baby, but mom saw something and said that baby has a special calling on his life, and she preserved him. And she sent him on his way on the river. The river that was supposed to kill him was the river that saved him. Put him in a little ark and sent him on that river. So we know Pharaoh's daughter finds this baby. Fascinatingly, the woman he gets to nurse her, now remember, all these women are having babies, is his own mother. So his own mother nurses him. So here Moses grows up in the house of Pharaoh. He's a prince, not like the prince of Egypt, but he's a prince. And, but he knows his heritage, right? He knows who he is because he knows the Israelites are his people. So when he sees some brutality happening, what happens? He tries to defend, and he kills an Egyptian defending an Israelite. He looks around, makes sure nobody sees him, and then he tries to hide the body. Then he's there, two Israelites are arguing, and he tries to be brotherly and stop the fight. And what are you going to do? Kill us like you killed that Egyptian? So now he knows, and so he knows now, I got to run. So he goes out. He's gone for 40 years. He was 40 when it happened. He's gone for 40 years. He's now 80 years old. When Yahweh decides to speak to him and say, it's time to go back to Egypt and get my people. So we're going to pick up in Exodus 3:18. This is Yahweh talking to Moses and telling Moses what he wants him to do. And he says, they shall hearken to thy voice. He's talking about his brethren, the Israelites. And you shall come, you and the elders of Israel, unto the king of Egypt, and you shall say unto him, Yahweh, God of the Hebrews, hath met with us, and now let us go, we beseech you, 3 days' journey into the wilderness, that we may sacrifice to Yahweh our God. Okay, so since he's the same, yesterday, today, and forever, and he changes not, the way he has given in the beginning is the way he still has. So my question is, have you made your 3-day journey? The number 3 is used 467 times in the Bible. It pictures completeness, though to a lesser degree than the number 7. 7 is the number of completeness and perfection, both physical and spiritual. All Yahweh is stating here is you have to be sanctified to worship him. For this is the will of Yah, even your sanctification. So here's Yahweh, told Moses what he wants him to do. Go back to your people. They'll receive you after you say the I am sent you, blah, 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 And then gather the elders and go to the king of Egypt and tell them, the God of the Hebrews, Yahweh, has told us to come to you and tell you, let us go 3 days' journey so that we can sacrifice unto Yahweh. And Pharaoh figured in chapter 5, this is where he actually goes and does the deed. So we're skipping 4, we're going to chapter 5. And he says, here we have Moses doing as Yahweh commanded. They're here. And afterwards Moses and Aaron went in and told Pharaoh, thus saith Yahweh, God of Israel, let my people go, that we may hold a feast unto me in the wilderness. And Pharaoh said, who's Yahweh? That I should obey his voice and let Israel go. I know not Yahweh, neither will I let Israel go. And they said, the God of the Hebrews hath met with us. Let us go, we pray thee. Okay? 3 days' journey into the desert and sacrifice unto Yahweh our God, lest he fall upon us with pestilence or with sword. So Pharaoh, since he did not know Yahweh, figured they had too much free time on their hands. So he made it harder for the people to make bricks. Remember, they're slaves. Part of what they do is make bricks. So he said, don't give them any straw. Now, I don't know how they made bricks. It had to do with clay and straw and baking them and stuff like that. But they don't have straw. They're missing an ingredient. And they have to make the same amount of bricks. So I'm assuming that if you don't have no straw, it's going to be harder to make bricks. The straw probably held the clay together so that when it was baked, it had a more firmness to it. So it was more difficult. They probably had to bake a whole lot more bricks and figure out a way because they would just crumble. It's just baked clay, So now the people don't like Moses because they got to work harder. Pharaoh is fine. I still have my slaves. Obviously, they had too much time on their hand to think about stuff, so we'll make them work harder. So in chapter 7, it's starting at verse 16, we see the first plague. which is the water turned to blood. And then we go into chapter 8, and we see 3 plagues: the frogs, lice or gnats, depending on your translation, and flies. So at plague 3, he makes a distinction between Egypt and Goshen. Although Goshen was in Egypt, but the Israelites lived in Goshen and everybody else lived in Egypt. So picking it up in chapter 8, verses 20 through 24, he says, "And Yahweh said to Moses, Rise up early in the morning and stand before Pharaoh. Lo, he cometh forth to the water, and say unto him, Thus saith Yahweh, Let my people go, that they may serve me. Else, if thou wilt not let my people go, behold, I will send swarms of flies upon thee, and upon thy servants, and upon thy people, and into thy houses. And the houses of the Egyptians shall be full of swarms of flies, and also the ground whereon they are. And I will sever in that day the land of Goshen, in which my people dwell, that no swarm of flies shall be there. To the end you may know that I am Yahweh in the midst of the earth. And I will put a division between my people and thy people. Tomorrow shall this sign be. And Yahweh did so, and there came a grievous swarm of flies into the house of Pharaoh, and unto his servant's house, and into all the land of Egypt. The land was corrupted by reason of the swarms of flies. And Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron and said, Go ye, sacrifice to your God in the land. And Moses said, It is not meet to do so, for we shall sacrifice the abomination of the Egyptians to Yahweh our God. Lo, shall we sacrifice the abomination of the Egyptians before their eyes, and they will not stone us? We will go 3 days' journey into the wilderness and sacrifice to Yahweh our God as he has commanded. And Pharaoh said, I will let you go, that ye may sacrifice to Yahweh your God in the wilderness, only you shall not go very far. Entreat for me. And Moses said, Behold, I go out from thee, and I will entreat Yahweh, that the swarms of flies may depart from Pharaoh, from his servants, and from his people tomorrow. But let not Pharaoh deal deceitfully any more in not letting the people go to sacrifice to Yahweh." So now let's get this, because we skipped a couple chapters. So the first few plagues, the water turning to blood and the frogs, happened everywhere. Now, if you're an Israelite and your deliverer, Moses, is going after the Egyptians, but the thing he's doing to the Egyptians is happening to you too, I don't think you're going to like him too much. But we have to understand what Yahweh's doing. See, Israel's been in bondage for hundreds of years, and they don't know Yahweh. They know of Yahweh, but they don't know Yahweh. They know the stories of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and of Joseph, but they don't know Yahweh. So Yahweh is showing everybody he's got power. But them first 2 plagues, let me take that back. The water and the frogs, the magicians did. Those first 2, the magicians did. And then when it came to the gnats and the lice, there was a distinction. So now Yahweh's saying, okay, watch this. See, because they think it happens everywhere. Now I'm going to show them how great I really am, that I can direct this thing in this area and protect this area. So now it comes to, now Israelites are seeing, wow, Yah's for us. Okay, so now we get to the flies. I want you to note, special note, of that we're beginning to see how the devil works. See, first when you decide you want to serve Yahweh, he makes things a little harder for you. So he told Moses what to do. Moses went to do it, and the punishment was, I'm making life harder for you because you want to go serve some God I don't even know. So he makes life a little harder for you, and he occupies your time. But once he sees you are determined to worship Yahweh, He doesn't try to stop you. He just wants you to do it a way other than the way Yahweh has commanded. And Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron and said, go, sacrifice to Yah, where? In the land. You can serve Yahweh, but right here. And Pharaoh said, I'll let you go that you may sacrifice to Yahweh your God in the wilderness. Only don't go too far. So you can either do it right here in the land, or you can go a little bit over that way, but not too far. I think this is one of the biggest tools of the devil. No sanctification. What a deceit. People think they are worshiping Yahweh and they've stayed in the land of their bondage. Chapter 9, we've got livestock die. We've got the plague of boils and hail. Note that all of this is happening only in Egypt and not in Goshen. Picking up in chapter 10, verses 1 through 8. And Yahweh said unto Moses, go in unto Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart, and the heart of his servants, that I might show these signs before him, and that you may tell in the ears of thy son and of thy son's son what things I have wrought in Egypt, and my signs which I have done among them, that ye may know how that I am Yahweh. Y'all hear that? Did you all catch that? And Yahweh said unto Moses, go unto Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and hid the heart of his servants, that I might show these my signs before him, and that you may tell in the ears of your children what things I have wrought in Egypt, and my signs which I have done among them, that you may know how that I am Yahweh. And Moses and Aaron came in unto Pharaoh and said unto him, thus saith Yahweh, God of the Hebrews, how long wilt thou refuse to humble thyself before me? Let my people go, that they may serve me. Else, if thou refuse to let my people go, behold, tomorrow I will bring the locusts into thy coast, and they shall cover the face of the earth, that one cannot be able to see the earth. And they shall eat the residue of that which is escaped, which remains unto you from the hail, and shall eat every tree which grows for you out of the field. And they shall fill thy house, and the house of all thy servants, and the house of all the Egyptians, which neither thy fathers nor thy fathers' fathers have seen, since the day that they were upon the earth unto this day. And he turned himself and went out from Pharaoh. And Pharaoh's servants said unto him, how long shall this man be a snare unto us? Let the men go, that they may serve Yahweh their God. Thou knowest thou not yet that Egypt is destroyed? And Moses and Aaron were brought again unto Pharaoh, and he said unto them, go serve Yahweh your God. But who are they that shall go with you? And Moses said, we will go with our young and with our old, with our sons and with our daughters, with our flocks and with our herds we will go. For we must hold a feast unto Yahweh. And he said unto them, let Yahweh be so with you, as I will let you go, and your little ones look to it. For evil is before you. Not so. Go now, ye that are men, and serve Yahweh. For that ye did desire, and they were driven out from Pharaoh's presence. And Yahweh said unto Moses, stretch out your hand over all the land of Egypt for the locusts, that they may come up upon the land of Egypt and eat every herb of the land, even all that the hail hath left. And Moses stretched forth his rod over the land of Egypt, and Yahweh brought an east wind upon the land all that day and all that night. And when it was morning, the east wind brought the locusts, and the locusts went up over the land of Egypt and rested in all the coast of Egypt. Very grievous were they. Before them were no such locusts as they, neither after them shall such be. For they covered the face of the whole earth, so that the land was darkened. And they did eat every herb of the land, and all the fruit of the trees which the hail had left. And there remaineth not any green thing in the tree or in the herbs of the field, through all the land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron in haste, and he said, I have sinned against Yahweh your God and against you. Now therefore forgive, I pray, my sin only this once, and entreat Yahweh your God that he may take away from me this death only. And he went out from Pharaoh and entreated Yahweh, and Yahweh turned a mighty strong west wind, which took away the locusts and cast them into the Red Sea. There remained not one locust in all the coast of Egypt. But Yahweh hardened Pharaoh's heart so that he would not let the children of Israel go. So we see the first compromise when Yahweh, remember this was Yahweh's command, he said, go and tell Pharaoh to let you go 3 days' journey. And then after a couple incidences, he was willing to let them go, but they needed to stay in the land or not go too far from the land. And Moses was like, we have to do 3 days' journey. Then we see, another incident coming up. After a few more incidences, then we see this one coming up. And even Pharaoh's servants are getting a little fed up with this. Like, can you not just, get rid of this man? Just get rid of him. Can't you see we're destroyed? We're destroyed. And Pharaoh, though who he was, pride and puffed up, he didn't want to do that, and he still don't want to do it. He half listened to the council, so he asked Moses, well, who's all got to go with you? So Moses tells him, well, us, our everything, our cattle, our flocks, our children, young and old, we all go on. And so Pharaoh gives him a compromise. He said, how about just the men go? Now, he doesn't say they have to stay in the land. They can do a 3 days journey, but just go. This compromise here, when I leave part of me in the world, my affections keep returning. So he had no fear of letting the men go, knowing they would come back. Exactly, and their stuff. So even those that were single still had their stuff. Their livelihood, their flocks, their herds. That was the way of their living. So Pharaoh had no problem. Well, you can go 3 days journey, just the men go. The enemy wants to divide the family. When Yahweh calls you, he not only wants you, but all that pertains to you. Everything that pertains to you. If you leave any part of you in the world, your affection, like Lot's wife, she left something back there. There was something she yearned for. So she turned and looked. Her heart, there was something that she yearned. So if we leave any part of ourselves in the world, we're going to continue to turn or return because it's connected to us. We're a part, and we miss that. So now I want to pick up in verse 21 to 24. And Yahweh said unto Moses, now remember, he took away the locusts, and Pharaoh hardened his heart, which he's been doing. So what am I at, plague 8? And Yahweh said unto Moses, stretch out your hand toward heaven, that there may be darkness over the land of Egypt, even the darkness which may be felt. And Moses stretched forth his hand toward heaven, and there was a thick darkness in all the land of Egypt 3 days. They saw not one another, neither rose any from his place for 3 days. But all the children of Israel had light in their dwellings. And Pharaoh called unto Moses and said, Go, serve Yahweh. Only let your flocks and your herds be stayed. Let your little ones also go with you. And Moses said, Thou must give us also sacrifices and burnt offerings, that we may sacrifice unto Yahweh our God. Our cattle also shall go with us. There shall not be a hoof left behind. For therefore we must take to serve Yahweh our God, and we know not with what we must serve Yahweh until we come thither. But Yahweh hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he would not let them go. And Pharaoh said unto him, Get thee from me, take heed to thyself, see my face no more. For in that day thou see my face, thou shalt die. And Moses said, Thou hast spoken well, I will see thy face again no more. So here we see this last compromise. You can take your kids, take all the people, but leave your stuff behind. And again, this flocks and herds wasn't just stuff. This was their livelihood. This is what fed them. This was, so you're connected to your job. Even if you hate it, you get up and go to work. Because you need money to pay bills, to buy groceries, you're connected to it. So when Yahweh would say, just quit your job, you'd be like, huh? Well, I have to pay the bills. How am I going to eat? We throw all these questions at Yahweh. Okay. And so they would still be connected and maybe try to make efforts, or some people would go and not all the people would go, because some would be, yes, let's get out of here while we can. And others would be like, well, I need my stuff. So now the nation would be divided. And Yahweh's trying to deliver them all up out of here. So, of course, I'm doing this and I'm thinking, when Yahweh calls you, he not only wants you, but all that pertains to you again. And then, of course, give it all to Yahshua. Not just my sin, but everything within. If he's not God of everything, he's not God at all. I can't do this thing part way. That's part of the problem. We do part way. We must obey Yahweh. Remember, this is just an example. Paul said all scripture, Exodus, is for your learning. Yah has something in here for us. We see this compromise the devil has for us. After Yahweh has called you for deliverance and said, separate yourself, 3 days journey. 3 days journey. We must hear the call of deliverance and move out with all that is us. For we cannot worship Yahweh in the land of our bondage. That is why the call has gone out from the time of Abraham. Now Yahweh had said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country into a land that I will show thee. Abraham dwelt in a land that knew not Yahweh and worshipped idols. Yahweh wanted Abraham to come out with all that was his, but to leave behind the customs and traditions of the land and the people. The call is still going forth to come out and be ye separate. Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. My people, go ye out of the midst of her, and deliver ye every man his soul from the fierce anger of Yahweh. Please remember, you must not bring with you the customs and traditions of the land or the people. Israel failed at this. They kept in mind those customs and traditions of Egypt, and the moment Moses was away too long, they fell into another compromise of the adversary. Worship Yahweh your way. Yah has no desire to judge us with the world, but unless we come out of the world, he has no choice. Even with Lot, it's a calling out. He's going to judge Sodom and Gomorrah, and because of Abraham, he went and offered Lot a way out. It's scriptural. You have to come up out of your bondage. You cannot worship Yahweh where you're at. You have to come up out of it. He who hath delivered us from the power of darkness hath translated us into the kingdom of his dear Son. So when we receive Yahshua, he translates us into the kingdom of his dear Son. When you take Gospel 101, the rescue, you're a drowning person and you got to be taken up out of the water, or you're in the marketplace and you're being sold as a servant. You need to be purchased and took up out of that place. Thus our 3 days journey. You know, of course, I'm not speaking literally that we have to pack up and move 3 days. It's a spiritual journey. And not of a literal 3 days. Remember 3, completeness, till I be complete in him. You see, our journey is from the place of our bondage to the very presence of Yahweh. We'll call it holiness. Now, as we come up out of our land of bondage and start on our journey, we spy a place that looks like holiness, so we camp there. After a while, we recognize this is not the place called holiness, for we have found some sin or fault there in us. So it's time once again to move on, and we shall do this all our lives until our last bondage, this flesh, is gone, and we truly reach the place called holiness. You know, I'm talking about the Feast of Unleavened Bread, don't you? You caught that? The rest of your life, you're going through life, moving, removing sin, moving on, removing sin, moving on. You see, before Yahshua becomes your Passover, you will have heard his voice. The cry of deliverance. You must respond as Moses did to Pharaoh. With every compromise offered, he said, we will go 3 days' journey unto the wilderness and sacrifice to Yahweh our God as he has commanded. Purge out, therefore, the old leaven, that ye may be a new lump, as ye are unleavened. For even Messiah, our Passover, is sacrificed for us. Note the next plague. Note where I left off. If you come before me again, Moses, I'll kill you. And Moses said, you have said right. And then we see the death of the firstborn, which is the last plague, which is the Passover. For even Messiah, our Passover, is sacrificed for us. Therefore, let us keep the feast of unleavened bread, removing sin, the continual moving on. Neither with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. But the hour comes, and now is, when the true worshipers shall worship Yahweh in spirit and in truth. For the fathers seek such to worship him. Yah is looking for those that will make a 3 days journey. He's looking for them that will not camp out, that say, I've gone far enough, I don't need to go any further, but will constantly sanctifying themselves again and again and again and moving on, knowing that there is a place, a time coming where we will see him face to face. No more through a glass darkly, no more shadowed, no more through the veil, but face to face. But we have to do it as we're progressing towards holiness. You can't be in your place of bondage. Note what Moses said in one of the incidents. He said, should we worship Yahweh in this place? Will not this be an offense to the Egyptians? And then he said, will not this be an offense to Yahweh? We cannot stay here. You cannot worship Yahweh in your bondage. It's an offense. It's not only an offense to the people who feel you're judging them, it's an offense to Yahweh. You cannot offer him polluted sacrifices. For the Father seeks such to worship him. Yahweh is spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth.